In our exam, disaster management also plays an important role. So before that, we need to understand the basic terms which are concerned with the disaster management. So as we have discussed already about the syllabus, different kinds of things we have been discussing, or we are going to discuss so far in our lessons. So first we'll start with the disaster management and its introduction. So, what do you mean by disaster management? To have a precise idea, what does it exactly mean? So, any occurrence that causes a damage, anything, even it is a man-made thing or a natural thing, which causes a damage, or else which causes a ecological disruption. And next, the loss of human life. When the damage caused, it might cause loss to the human life or any kind of property which is there on the earth. So, it can cause loss of life or deterioration of health.
ఇలాంటి మరిన్ని వీడియోల కోసం ఇప్పుడే డౌన్లోడ్ చేయండి ప్లాటో ఆన్లైన్ యాప్ లింక్ కోసం డిస్క్రిప్షన్ లో చూడండి. ప్లాటో ఆన్లైన్ యాప్ మీ విజయానికి మీకు తోడుగా.
Deterioration of health, and which cannot be given by health services. In some places, when damage happened, when there is a collapse of a dam or when there is an earthquake, there we cannot approach or we cannot provide the health services as much as required. So for in that conditions where the large scale amount of loss can be done, so in that case we need to have a precaution or the control or a prevention. Different kinds of strategies should be developed for this control of this anything which happens to the disaster. So that is what we are calling it as a disaster management. So the disaster can be any occurrence that causes the damage or the ecological disruption or the loss of human life or the deterioration of the health or health services on a sufficient to warrant an extraordinary response from outside the affected community or an area. So this definition is given by who? WHO. WHO is nothing but the World Health Organization. What does it mean? World Health Organization. It is the definition which is given by the World WHO, which is also called as the World Health Organization. So in other way, we can simply call that as a disaster can be defined as an occurrence either by the nature or a man-made. Disaster always can be two types. That is natural. Man-made. Man-made is nothing but the destruction which caused due to the intervention of a man that causes the human suffering and creates a human needs that victims cannot elevate without assistance. So when this kind of disaster happens, certainly they need some kind of support from different kinds of aspects, either from the human support or the medical support or the financial support, or they might need some kind of equipment for the survival or the infrastructure support, transportation support, which anything can be cost or which anything can be given to the people who have gone through this certain kind of disaster. So disaster can be natural or man-made. Or disaster, it causes a damage or a ecological disruption, or it causes a deterioration in the health, or it causes the deterioration in the health services, or even it causes the loss of life. So we have seen the two different kinds of definition for the disaster management. So you cannot remember the as it is definition At this point, in the exam point of view, we don't need to remember that exact definition of the disaster management, but we need to understand that whatever is there, we need to understand the gist of that or the summary of that exact concept of that definition. So that is enough for in our exam point of view. So in here, disaster అనేది ఎక్కడ జరగచ్చు? when and where it occurs. So where can this disaster occur? So how or when, where it occurs, over a period of time, where does the disaster occurs? It can happen anytime or anywhere. It is not confined to the any part of the world. Where if we take our India as an example, it has certain kinds of criteria where it can have a different kinds of disasters around its geographical location. So some disasters can be predicted or some disasters cannot be predicted. So there are different kinds of disasters which has been taking place over the ages, and now also there have been some kind of disruption which is happening anywhere in the any part of the world or anywhere in the any part of the India as well. So when and where it occurs means it can happen anywhere, anytime it can happen. So what is the another kind of disaster? Warfare. Warfare, have you ever listened about this term, or have you ever heard of this term warfare? It is a special category type of disaster. So because it is well planned and damage is intended to goal of action. Warfare, it is a well planned disaster and its damage is the intended goal of action. Intended goal of action. So here we can understand that warfare, it is especially designed to cause a damage, or it is designed to cause a damage to the health, or it is designed to the damage which is caused to the human life, where we can expect it beyond. So the warfare, it is a special kind or special category of the destruction which is designed by the humans. So what are the different factors affecting the disaster? What are the different categories of factors which are affecting the disaster? First one is the host factors, and second one is the environmental factors. Here, if we see this host factors, it has the age. First one we can consider is the age. Next one is the immunization status. Third one is the degree of mobility. Last one is the emotional stability. So if we take the environmental factors, it also has a different kind of factors. We all know we can expect those are the physical factors, chemical factors, biological factors, and next one is the social factors. Last one is the psychological factors. So if we see these factors which are affecting the disaster, first one we'll talk about the host factors. What do you mean by the host factor? Host factor is nothing but when we consider a human being, we consider that human being's age as well. So we are considering the age factor. Next one is the immunization status. Immunization means the injection which is given to cause an immunity in a human being. So different kinds of immunization or the different kinds of injections are given to the human being when the baby is born. Over the period of time, it starts at the 8 weeks of time or 8 days of time, over the 3 months or the 3 weeks, we have to give different kinds of immunization to the kid to have the certain kinds of immunity. So degree of mobility. Now in this pandemic season, we are able to learn that with the mobility of an human being, there is a deterioration in the certain kinds of aspects in the human behavior. Certain kinds of loss in the human health because of the mobility of a human being. You can understand that why we are participating in that social distancing, why we are gathering, we are not gathering in groups as we used to gather, why we are participating in a different kinds of immunization, or why we are participating in certain kinds of restrictions, why we are agreeing to the different kinds of aspects now in this pandemic season. So all these conditions are applicable, how the factors are affecting certain kind of disaster. So the host factor, they are the age, immunization, mobility, and the emotional stability. Emotional stability means now we are facing different kinds of mental health disorders where we can experience that certain kinds of ups and downs. Certain categories of people, they are not at all afraid of this virus. Certain categories of people, they are too much afraid of this virus. So according to that only you can understand, we are not only talking about the biological factors or the pandemic what is caused now, we are talking about the different kinds of disasters. So either it can be man-made, or either it can be natural one, or either it can be the both. We are talking about the anything, any kind of the disaster. So environmental factors, we are going to learn that in detail. So if before that, we need to understand that the factors affecting the disaster are the host factors and environmental factor. Environmental factors, they are again divided into physical factors, chemical factors, biological factors, social and psychological factors. So these are the different kinds of factors which are affecting this disaster. So next aspect that we need to understand is effects of the disaster. In our definition, we have learned the objective or the major subjects of the disaster. What could be the effects of the disaster? In definition, we already learned that. So the first one could be the population displacement.
ఇలాంటి మరిన్ని వీడియోల కోసం ఇప్పుడే డౌన్లోడ్ చేయండి ప్లాటో ఆన్లైన్ యాప్. యాప్ లింక్ కోసం డిస్క్రిప్షన్ లో చూడండి. ప్లాటో ఆన్లైన్ యాప్ మీ విజయానికి మీకు తోడుగా.
Population displacement. Next one is injury or death. So if we take an example of an earthquake, what happens there? Anybody will stay at that same place when earthquake occurs? People, they run from one place to the another place where they find it as a safe one, or where they find it as a safe haven. So there is a population displacement. So if they are not moving, there is a certain kind of injuries might take place, or even death can occur. So next one is the risk of what kind of disease what we are facing. It can be a epidemic disease. Not only the viral infections where floods occur, where different kinds of floods occur, there is a cause, or there is a chance of this kind of epidemic of disease where they can experience the cholera, diarrhea, different kinds of aspects which are waterborne disease. So if happens in a large scale, which can lead to the waterborne or airborne, any other kind of the soil-borne diseases which can lead to the epidemic or a pandemic. So the risk of epidemic of disease is there. Next, if the earthquake occurs or the any kind of disaster occurs, what can we expect? There is a damage of infrastructure. So simply we can say that damage to infrastructure. So next is the psychological problems. So psychological problems, it might not be exactly the emotional stress, but it can be the different kinds of aspects which related to the stress. It could be the emotional stress or the anxiety or different kinds of phobias, which can lead to the different kinds of psychological problems. Next one is the food shortage. So food shortage means everybody have their ration or everybody have their food supplies in their home. When the infrastructure damage occurs, they cannot get inside the home and cook for themselves. Or when floods or droughts occur, there is the shortage of food because the crop get destroyed because of the flood or the drought. So there is a food shortage. And socio-economic losses. Socio means people loss, and economic means infrastructure loss, and economic means the financial losses can be seen during this effects of the disaster. And next thing we can understand is there is a shortage of the medical supplies. In short, we can call that as the healthcare supplies. What comes in this healthcare supplies? First one is the medical supplies. Next one is the people who gives this medical supplies. There we can call as the infrastructure deficiency or the healthcare providers deficiency or the drugs deficiency. We can have the different kinds of effects which can be seen during when a disaster occurs. So these are the different kinds of effects that occurs due to the disaster. Next one or the next aspect that we need to remember is, first of all, we need to talk about the types of disasters. In definition, what we have learned from the definition, they are natural disasters, man-made disasters. What could be the natural disasters? We can name it. Now we have now we have spoken about earthquakes. So I am taking earthquakes first, and next one is floods. Next one is cyclones, tsunamis. Last but not the least, it can be seen in people who live in mountain areas or near the what we call Himalayas. So avalanches, landslides are the more common factors. So in man-made disasters, what could be the possible disasters that can occur? Chemical disaster. We have the Bhopal gas tragedy. That could be the chemical or the biological. Next is the nuclear disaster. Can you name the nuclear disaster which has taken place in this history? So we can learn that over the period of time, so that these are the different kinds of disasters that can occur possibly. So in natural disasters, we have seen this earthquake, flood, cyclone, tsunami. In if we consider our Earth or if we consider our India on the Earth's face, we have the different kinds of possibilities according to the geographical location or the geographical conditions. So one kind of disaster can be confined to only one part of the India. So where we can see the landslides or the avalanches, where in the Himalayan regions, where we can see the plenty of mountains over there. Where beneath that we can see these plateaus where the floods can occur, where the cyclones can occur. So in the coastal area, there is the possibility of the tsunamis, where in this Himalayan region or this mountainous region, where we can see the earthquakes, where there is the tectonic plate movement, right? So where in this man-made disasters, where the stampedes is nothing but when the group of people, when they go to the Kumbh Mela, where the stampede can occur, where the stampede can occur, where the wild animals are crossing one point of road to the another point of road, where it is located in between the forest crossing. So stampedes can occur, fires. We have seen the Amazon forest fires there. So the transport accidents can occur, whether it can be the aircraft or whether it can be the railways, whether it can be the different kinds of transportation that we use. Ships can be broken, or the different kinds of accidents can be done. So different kinds of accidents which are taking place over a period of time, it can lead to the major accidents. We can call them industrial accidents. Oil spillages, we can see this kind of accidents over the marine bodies, where it can lead to the loss of the many marine animals lives. So it can cause a deterioration of the oxygen levels in the water, where it covers the upper part of the water body, which cannot keep the circulation of oxygen, where it leads to the damage of life in the marine. So next kind of explosion can be due to the nuclear explosion or the radiation, and war, which is caused due to the deliberate attacks of the people, or the deliberate attacks of the terrorists, or the deliberate attacks of the different kinds of people who are there living there. So if we consider, there is a lot of possibility of the war in between the China and India, or China and different parts of the world, or India and Pakistan, India and different parts of the world. So it is a deliberate action which is designed by the man. So it can lead to the damage of the infrastructure, damage of the life, damage of the healthcare services, different kinds of things which can lead to the damage over a period of time. It can occur directly at once, or it can occur stage by stage. So these are the different kinds of or different types of disasters.
ఇలాంటి మరిన్ని వీడియోల కోసం ఇప్పుడే డౌన్లోడ్ చేయండి ప్లాటో ఆన్లైన్ యాప్ లింక్ కోసం డిస్క్రిప్షన్ లో చూడండి. ప్లాటో ఆన్లైన్ యాప్ మీ విజయానికి మీకు తోడుగా.
Next, we'll talk about the severity of the impact. If we see this, the severity of the impact depends upon the many factors. First factor that we can is the predictability. In this predictability, some of these disasters such as cyclones, floods can be predicted, and that degree of preparedness will be high. So if we see, the predictability can be seen. Ippudu Vatavarana Shaka, if they give certain kind of alert, వాతావరణం బాలేదు కాబట్టి దే షుడ్ నాట్ గో ఫర్ ఫిషింగ్. సో ఇలాంటి కైండ్స్ ఆఫ్ అలర్ట్స్ మనకి తెలిసే ఉంటుంది. వాతావరణం బాలేదు కాబట్టి కోస్టల్ రివిజన్లో ఉన్నటువంటి వాళ్ళు ఆ ఏరియా వికెట్ చేసి వెళ్ళిపోవాలి. సో దీస్ కైండ్ ఆఫ్ అలర్ట్స్ కెన్ బి గివెన్ when there are floods and cyclones. These are given people who are living in coastal areas and people who are going for fishing. So there is some kind of predictability, right? So next one is the type of disaster. What kind of disaster can occur over a period of time or at that particular period of time? In earthquakes, the mortality is high because the people get crushed between the falling objects and collapsed building. ఇలాగా సెస్మిక్ వేవ్స్ అనేవి లేదంటే కనుక భూమి ఇలా కదిలినప్పుడు దానివల్ల జరిగేటువంటి నష్టం ఏంటి? వీఆర్ నాట్ గోయింగ్ ఇన్సైడ్ ద మౌత్ ఆఫ్ ద ఎర్త్ డైరెక్ట్లీ, బట్ there is major loss of the human beings or the major loss of infrastructure can be seen. Major loss of human beings anedi ela untundi, they can fall under these collapses. So there is a lot of injuries can happen. There is a lot of loss of the human beings where they can fall under these collapses or under these buildings and collapsed buildings or falling objects. So there is the type, there is a certain kind of damage which can occur, which can lead to the mortality. Mortality is nothing but the in simpler ways we can call the rate of death. Mortality is nothing but the rate of death. Next one is the density and population distribution. Here we can understand that if the people are not at all living in that place, earthquake occurs, or if there is no infrastructure available, there is a loss of infrastructure. There is no loss of infrastructure. So depending upon the density or depending upon the population distribution in that area or in that particular area where the different kinds of disasters can occur, This also plays a major role in the impact created by these disasters. So next one is the opportunity of warning. Some kind of disasters can be given by a warning, where the severity can be predicted, where the severity of the disaster can be predicted, where and how it can occur, or how the disaster can stay, how long it going to occur. Different kinds of warnings can give a certain kind of opportunity to get protected from that kind of disaster. So next one is the condition of the environment. Different environmental conditions can play a major role in this disaster management. So what are the different aspects of the environment can be affected due to these disasters? Disaster అనేది వచ్చినప్పుడు where the people can affected, healthcare services can affected, due to the floods and the droughts different kinds of areas can be affected. ఇక్కడ infrastructure loss అనేది ఉంటే కనుక there can lead to the noise pollution or the soil pollution or the water pollution or the different kinds of pollutions can occur, right? So in these conditions, with this various aspects of the disasters, environment can be affected with the overall way. It can occur in any aspect, in any direction. So the condition of the environment is also playing a major role in the severity of the impact. So what are the different kinds of what we call as impacts that can be predicted, or the factors which are affecting the severity of the impact are: first one is the predictability, type of disaster which is occurring, density and population distribution, and opportunity of warning, and condition of the environment at that particular period of time. Okay, the severity of this what we call disaster has to be measured. So how can we measure the severity? So let's look into this measuring of severity. Severity can be measured by the scope and its topography and the rate of change where it can be expressed. So if we have to keep it in a straight way, the scale, it is normalized function whose variables are the scope and topography and the rate of change, and expressed in a formula called as Ron emergency formula. Ron emergency formula. E ante emergency, where it is equal to STD. STD F it is multiplying with STD. STD ante enti STD. S is for scope, T is for topography, and D is for rate of change. సో ఈ ఫార్ములా మనకు అంత ఇంపార్టెంట్ ఏం కాదు, బట్ అర్థం చేసుకోవడానికి సరిపోతే చాలు. ఇట్ ఈస్ నాట్ దట్ మచ్ ఇంపార్టెంట్ ఇన్ ఎగ్జామ్ పాయింట్ ఆఫ్ వ్యూ. బట్ రాన్స్ ఎమర్జెన్సీ ఫార్ములా అంటే ఏంటి అంటే మీకు ఒక ఐడియా ఉంటే చాలు. వాట్ ఆర్ ద ఫ్యాక్టర్స్ ఇన్వాల్వ్డ్ ఇన్ దాట్ ఆర్ ద వేరియబుల్స్ ఇన్వాల్వ్డ్ ఇన్ దాట్ అంటే మీకు ఒక ఐడియా ఉంటే చాలు. సో హియర్ ద ఫ్యాక్టర్స్ ఇన్వాల్వ్డ్ ఆర్ ద స్కోప్, టోపోగ్రఫీ and the rate of change. The factor that we need to understand is the morbidity and mortality. మార్బిడిటీ అంటే ఏంటి, మోర్టాలిటీ అంటే ఏంటి అని అంటే, ఇప్పుడు కోమార్బిడిటీస్ ఉన్న వాళ్ళకి కోవిడ్ అనేది ఎక్కువగా అఫెక్ట్ అవుతుందని చెప్పి మనం వింటూనే ఉన్నాం. వాట్ ఈస్ దట్ కోమార్బిడిటీ? కోమార్బిడిటీ అంటే ఒక్క జబ్బు కన్నా ఎక్కువ జబ్బులు ఉంటే కనుక దట్ ఈస్ వాట్ యు ఆర్ కాలింగ్ ఇట్ యాజ్ అ మార్బిడిటీ. సో ఎర్త్ క్వేక్స్ టైంలో, ఎర్త్ క్వేక్ అనేది సమ్టైమ్స్ వీ కెన్ ప్రెడిక్ట్, సమ్టైమ్స్ వీ కెన్ నాట్ ప్రెడిక్ట్. సో ఎర్త్ క్వేక్స్ టైం అనేది ఎప్పుడు వస్తుంది? అకర్ అయినప్పుడు, లేదంటే ఎక్కడో చోట ఎర్త్ క్వేక్ అనేది వచ్చినప్పుడు. అట్ ద టైమ్ ఆఫ్ ద ఎర్త్ క్వేక్ ఇట్ ఈస్ మోస్ట్ ఆఫ్ ద టైమ్ ఇట్ ఈస్ అన్ప్రెడిక్టబుల్. సడన్ గా వచ్చేస్తుంది. So sometimes it is predictable, where we can predict and we can have the certain kinds of arrangements. We can vacate these people from that place and we can keep them in the safer areas. So earthquake time lo major ga emautundi, people get crushed because they cannot escape. If it occurs in the night, many of the people, they will be in the sleeping mode, where they can relate to the crushing of the people under those collapses or the collapsing of the buildings. ఎలాగ మేజర్ కైండ్ ఆఫ్ డ్యామేజ్ ఏం జరిగేటువంటి అవకాశం ఉంది అని అంటే, ఫ్రాక్చర్స్ అవుతాయి. డిఫరెంట్ కైండ్స్ ఆఫ్ పార్ట్స్లో ఫ్రాక్చర్స్ అవుతాయి. సో పెల్విస్ రీజన్లో కానీ, థొరాక్స్ రీజన్లో కానీ, స్పైన్ ఫ్రాక్చర్స్ కానీ, లేదంటే సర్వైకల్ బోన్ ఫ్రాక్చర్స్ కానీ మేజర్గా అయ్యేటువంటి అవకాశం ఉంది. సో వాల్కనిక్ ఎరప్షన్స్ అనేవి కనుక జరిగితే, వెన్ దెర్ ఇస్ అ పాసిబిలిటీ ఆఫ్ ద వాల్కనిక్ ఎరప్షన్, ఆ టైంలో ఎలాంటి డ్యామేజ్ వచ్చేటువంటి అవకాశం ఉంది? వాట్ కైండ్ ఆఫ్ డ్యామేజ్ కెన్ అకర్ ఎట్ ద టైమ్? సో వాల్కనిక్ ఎరప్షన్ అనగానే మనకి గుర్తొచ్చేటువంటిది ఏంటి? ఇట్ కెన్ హ్యావ్ అ లావా విచ్ ఇస్ కమింగ్ inside the earth, which has the highest possibility of melting everything, which can lead to the greater damage to the cattle or the infrastructure or the human beings. ఎక్కడో దూరంగా జరిగితే కనుక, లావా మన దగ్గర వరకు రాకుంటే కనుక ఇట్స్ ఓకే. బట్ ద ashes which are erupting from the volcanoes, it can damage to the crops, or it can be a damage to the human beings, it can be damage to the animal life also as well. సో వాల్కనైక్ ఎరప్షన్స్ జరిగినప్పుడు మడ్ స్లైడ్స్ అనేవి ఉంటాయి, లావా అనేది వస్తుంది. సో గ్లోయింగ్ క్లౌడ్ ఆఫ్ యాషెస్, యాషెస్ అనేది చాలా హైట్లో ఎగిరి దూరంగా ఉండేటువంటి ప్రదేశాల్లో పడేటువంటి అవకాశం ఉంది. కాబట్టి దేర్ ఈస్ ద మష్రూమ్ కైండ్ ఆఫ్ యాషెస్ కెన్ బి ఫార్మ్డ్ ఇన్ ద అట్మాస్ఫియర్. సో ఈ ఒక్క చోటే ఉంటుందనంటే ఇట్ కెన్ ట్రావెల్ టు ద ఎనీ పార్ట్ ఆఫ్ ద వరల్డ్ అరౌండ్ ఇట్. ఆ సర్కంఫరెన్స్లో లేదంటే ఆ ఏరియాలో, సర్క్యులర్ ఏరియాలో ఎనీ ఎక్స్టెంట్ ఆఫ్ డిస్టెన్స్ ఇట్ కెన్ ట్రావెల్ డిపెండింగ్ అపాన్ ద యాక్సలరేషన్ ఆఫ్ wind, depending upon the velocity of the wind. So there is major possibility of the traveling of that mud or the glowing ashes or the lava. So because of that, volcanic eruptions, major damage can be happened, which is unpredictable. Sleeping volcanoes అనేవి అంటే మనం volcanoes గురించి డిస్కస్ చేసుకునేటప్పుడు we can discuss it there, but different kinds of volcanoes are there. ఆ వాల్కనోస్ బేస్ చేసుకొని హౌ ఇట్ కెన్ హ్యాపెన్, ఎలాగ అన్ప్రెడిక్టబుల్ వాల్కనిక్ ఎరప్షన్స్ అనేవి ఎలా జరుగుతాయి అనేది దాని గురించి వీ కెన్ సీ దాట్ ఇన్ జాగ్రఫీ. సో నెక్స్ట్ వన్ ఇస్ ఫ్లడ్స్. ఫ్లడ్స్ అనేవి ఎలా వస్తాయి? we can expect flood to happen. Sometimes we cannot expect that. Floods అనేవి man made కూడా ఉంటాయి. ఎందుకంటే when it is not coming naturally, it is not because of the man made one, what we call, it is not due to the natural disasters, but it is a man made one, where the regular checks for the dams for cracks are not checked. టైడల్ వేవ్స్ నుంచి కూడా ఇలాంటివి వచ్చేటువంటి అవకాశం ఉంది. సో ఫ్లడ్స్ వచ్చినప్పుడు ఎలాగ ఫ్లడ్స్ వచ్చేటువంటి అవకాశం ఉంది అని అంటే, కొలాప్స్డ్ డ్యామ్స్ వేర్ ద రెగ్యులర్ చెక్స్ ఆర్ నాట్ మేడ్ ఫర్ ద క్రాక్స్ ఇన్ ద వాల్స్ ఆఫ్ ద డ్యామ్స్. అప్పుడు ఫ్లడ్స్ వచ్చేటువంటి అవకాశం ఉంది కదా. వెదర్ ద ఫ్లడ్ ఈస్ నేచురల్ ఆర్ మ్యాన్ మేడ్, ఇట్ ఈస్ డెఫినెట్లీ అ మ్యాన్ మేడ్ ఫ్లడ్. సో టైడల్ వేవ్స్ అని అంటే when the waves are crossing in to the regular living area. A tidal waves అనేవి కనిపెట్టలేక, where the observation is not made, it can lead to the life damage, where it can lead to the infrastructure damage. So these can cause the morbidity and mortality. Next one is droughts అనేవి ఎలా వస్తాయి? These are called as the what we called as the deficiency of food or the deficiency water. ఇలాగా అప్పుడు డ్రాట్స్ టైంలో వచ్చేటువంటి కండిషన్స్ ఏముంటాయి? డిహైడ్రేషన్ అనేది, when there is no proper water for drinking, there is the possibility of dehydration. Where there is excessive supply of water, it is called as flood. When there is no water at all, it can called as the drought. So it can lead to the dehydration. Next thing which can cause due to the droughts, where droughts can lead to the crop what we called as less nutrient crop or no crop at all, it can lead to the different kinds of malnutrition. So this can be called as the protein calorie malnutrition. So another kind of when there is different kinds of vitamin deficiencies అనేవి కనుక ఉంటాయి కనుక different kinds of vitamins, vitamin A which is actually leading to the blindness. ఇప్పుడు నైట్ బ్లైండ్నెస్ అని అంటాము, ఇట్ హ్యాపెన్స్ డ్యూ టు ది డెఫిషియన్సీ ఆఫ్ వైటమిన్ ఏ. It is leading to different kinds of eyesight disease. So it can be called as the xerophthalmia and the blindness. Xerophthalmia and blindness. So even dehydration can occur, where the diarrhea may also occur because of drought. Let's look into the India's vulnerability for disasters. If we see India's vulnerability according to the location of the what we call geographical location of the India, there is different kinds of vulnerability to the disasters. So major vulnerability is 57%, which is due to the earthquakes. Earthquakes can occur in the northern region where vulnerable to earthquakes where the mountains are placed. When these kind of droughts can be happen, or that 68% of land is vulnerable to droughts and the 12% of land is available for or vulnerable for floods. Next one is cyclones. Cyclones, it can happen where the over availability of the water, where the floods can occur. So in this area, 8% of land is vulnerable to what kind of thing? Cyclones. ఇది ఎక్కువగా coastal regions lo we can see this kind of floods and the cyclones. Apart from the natural disasters, some cities in India are also vulnerable to the chemical and industrial disasters. In this can called as the man-made disasters. Kabatti ఇది చూసుకున్నట్లయితే కనుక these are the different kinds of numbers which are available for the earthquakes, droughts, floods and cyclones. The other areas which are located in the urbanized areas where there is a possibility of the chemical and industrial disasters. So northern mountain region low, there is the possibility of the landslide. I have told you that already. In that area, northern region of India low, what are the different kinds of categories of things that we can see there? There we can see landslides or the snowstorms and earthquakes because of the geographical location. Where in the eastern side or the eastern coastal area, where it is prone to the floods and cyclones, where in the western areas it is prone to the drought areas. So if we consider on the western side, eastern side and the southern side, according to that we'll divide the different kinds of disasters. Northern region lo elanti disasters untayi? First one is the landslides. Next one is the snowstorms. And next one is the earthquakes. Landslides kani, avalanches kani antaru.
ఇలాంటి మరిన్ని వీడియోల కోసం ఇప్పుడే డౌన్లోడ్ చేయండి ప్లాటో ఆన్లైన్ యాప్. యాప్ లింక్ కోసం డిస్క్రిప్షన్లో చూడండి. ప్లాటో ఆన్లైన్ యాప్ మీ విజయానికి మీకు తోడుగా.
సో ఈస్టర్న్ సైడ్ పాసిబిలిటీ ఏముంది అని అంటే సివియర్ ఫ్లడ్స్ కానీ అండ్ సైక్లోన్స్. సో వెస్టర్న్ సైడ్ ఉండేటువంటివి ఏంటి? డ్రాట్ ఎందుకంటే ఇటువైపు అంతా కూడా ఎక్కువగా డెసర్ట్ ఏరియా ఉంది కాబట్టి దేర్ ఇస్ లాట్ ఆఫ్ పాసిబిలిటీ ఫర్ ద డ్రాట్ అనేది ఇక్కడ వచ్చేటువంటి అవకాశం ఉంది. సో సదరన్ సైడ్ అంతా కూడా ఇఫ్ యూ సే ఈ సదరన్ సైడ్ అంతా కూడా వీ కెన్ సీ ద వాటర్ బాడీ హియర్. సో ఇదంతా కూడా కోస్టల్ రీజన్. సో దేర్ ఇస్ అ పాసిబిలిటీ ఆఫ్ సునామీస్ వచ్చేటువంటి అవకాశం ఉంది, ఫ్లడ్స్, cyclones. So according to the geographical location of the India, there is lot of possibilities of different kinds of disasters that can take place. So if we see this, who will work for this disaster management? ఈ disaster management కోసం వర్క్ చేసేటువంటి వాళ్ళు ఎవరున్నారు అని చెప్పి చూస్తే కనుక, whenever the disaster occur, we will call the military force, right? మిలిటరీ ఫోర్స్ అనేది ఎప్పుడు అవైలబుల్గా ఉంటుంది. తర్వాత ఇమీడియట్ యాక్షన్ కెన్ బి టేకెన్ బై ద పోలీస్ అండ్ ద పిఎస్ఎఫ్. అంటే ఇప్పుడు వాలంటీర్స్, ఎన్జిఓస్ అనే వాళ్ళు ఉన్నప్పుడు దిస్ పీపుల్ దే ఆర్ కమింగ్ ఫార్వర్డ్ టు హెల్ప్ దిస్ గవర్నమెంట్ ఆస్పెక్ట్స్. సో వాలంటీర్స్, ఎన్జిఓస్ కింద కూడా మనము కన్సిడర్ చేసుకోవచ్చు. ఎన్జిఓస్ ఆర్ ఆల్సో ప్లేయింగ్ అ మేజర్ రోల్ టు వర్క్ ఆన్ దిస్ డిజాస్టర్స్. Disaster management అనేది, disaster management, it is a specialized training and it is provided by the local, state, federal and private organizations. It is not confined to the any one part where it is it cannot be confined to the only to the central part. So it can be divided to the local, state and federal and private organizations. Undergraduate కానీ గ్రాడ్యుయేట్ డిగ్రీస్ కానీ ఈ డిజాస్టర్ మేనేజ్మెంట్లో రిలేటివ్ ఫీల్డ్స్లో వివిధ రకాలైనటువంటి ఇన్స్టిట్యూషన్స్ అనేవి ప్రొవైడ్ చేయడం కూడా జరుగుతుంది అనమాట, వేర్ వీ కెన్ గెట్ ద సర్టిఫైడ్ ఎమర్జెన్సీ కోర్సెస్ ఆల్సో. ఈ డిజాస్టర్ మేనేజ్మెంట్కి సంబంధించి వివిధ రకాలైనటువంటి ఆర్గనైజేషన్స్ విచ్ ఆర్ లొకేటెడ్ ఇన్ ఇండియా, they are giving this undergraduate and graduate degrees also. For example, if we take Disaster Management Institute which is located in the Bhopal, Madhya Pradesh, and Disaster Mitigation Institute which is located in Ahmedabad and Gujarat which is located in the western side of India. So we can get the different kinds of this UG and PG courses from those institutions. So certified emergency manager, ikkada a most important degree which is given by the National Emergency Management Association and International Association of the Emergency Managers. These are the two examples for the professional organizations. Certified Emergency Manager, you can check that in the internet also. This is the most prestigious important degree for eradicating disasters or managing disasters or preventing or controlling these disasters. What are the principles of disaster management? Disaster management ki కావాల్సినటువంటి principle ఏంటి? If we say that the first principle of the disaster management is comprehensive. So comprehensive, the disaster managers consider and take into account of all hazards, whether it can be man-made or it can be a natural disaster, all phases and all impacts relevant to the disasters. So disaster managers ane vallu untaru. So these people consider what kind of hazard, only one kind of hazard or only half of the hazards? No, they'll take into account all kind of hazards. All kind of hazards can be taken into the considerations. So all phases can be considered and all impacts can be considered. So next is the progressive. Next principle is progressive. In this here, the anticipate the future disasters and take the preventive and preparatory measures. Next one is the risk driven. Every kind of disaster have their own kind of risk. So this risk driven principle has been taken under it. They use some risk management principles like hazard identification. ఎక్కడైతే పాసిబిలిటీ అనేది ఉంది, ఎక్కడైతే హజార్డ్ వచ్చేటువంటి అవకాశం ఉంది, దాన్ని మనం హజార్డ్ ఐడెంటిఫికేషన్ అంటున్నాము. దాని తర్వాత రిస్క్ అనాలిసిస్ risk analysis and impact analysis. So this is a certain kind of strategy which actually helps in the hazard identification. After that, the risk analysis, if the hazard occurs, how much risk can happen and its impact. We have discussed about the different kinds of impact of the different kinds of disasters already. So according to that only we can have a certain kind of understanding of this hazard identification, risk analysis and impact analysis. In assigning these priorities and these resources, ఈ రిస్క్ డ్రివెన్ దేనికి ఉపయోగపడుతుంది అని అంటే దీస్ రిస్క్ మేనేజ్మెంట్ ప్రిన్సిపల్స్ ఇవన్నీ కూడా రిస్క్ మేనేజ్మెంట్ ప్రిన్సిపల్స్ అన్నమాట. These are the risk management principles. In assigning the priorities, if we know these principles which are assigned, so we can have the priorities and the resources as well. Priorities and resources. And the next principle is integrated. The next principle is integrated. It ensures the unity of effort among all the levels of the government and all the elements of the community. So it is integrated because it need to take the help of the NGOs which are locally available, and it need to take the help of the state and central government, and it need to take the support of the local bodies. So it is a integrated one. It ensures the unity of effort among all the levels of government. It ensures the integrity of all the levels of government. And the next principle is collaborative. Integrated collaborative, it is actually giving a certain kind of same meaning, similar kind of meaning. So collaborative means creates a certain broad and sincere relationships among the individuals and organizations. So we can call that as collaborative, where it is calling each and everybody in the community, society, state and center. Next one is the coordinated. In this coordinated, this synchronizes the activities to achieve a common purpose. Synchronizes the activity common purpose. So it is called as a coordinated. Next one is the flexible. Next principle is flexible. So it uses the creative and innovative approaches. Flexible and in the country, it is not only confined to the traditional ideas, or it is not only confined to the highly evolved ideas. It is actually incorporating the creative and innovative approaches. Creative and innovative approaches in this disaster management or solving the disaster challenges. Next one is professional. We have already discussed about the different kinds of courses which are designed for the disaster management. So this is professional. So value a science and knowledge based approach for the continuous improvement. Continuous and improvement అనేది లేకుంటే గనుక the disasters which are created by the man, they are evolving over the period of time. So continuous improvement అనేది ఉండాలి, న్యూ నాలెడ్జ్ అప్లికేషన్ అనేది ఉండాలి, న్యూ నాలెడ్జ్ బేస్ అప్రోచ్ అనేది ఉండాలి, సైన్స్ అనేది ఎదుగుతూ ఉండాలి. What we can call that as evolution of science can be applied there, or it can give actual value of a science, and it is actually a knowledge based approach, and it requires a continuous improvement.